Nalin had always stood out, even as a small child. While the other young girls in her Apache community moved lightly across the ground, she grew faster, taller, and stronger than anyone expected. By the time she reached her teenage years, she towered above most adults in her settlement. People often said she had the spirit of the mountains inside her, steady and unshakable, as if the earth itself had shaped her bones. Some admired her strength, while others found it unusual, something hard to understand. But no matter what they felt, they always kept a certain distance, and that distance slowly grew into a quiet ache inside her heart. She was not frightening, nor did she ever try to appear that way. Her nature was calm, thoughtful, and observant. She liked to watch people more than she liked to talk. She enjoyed helping elders gather herbs or carrying heavy baskets that smaller hands could not lift. Her tall frame and strong arms made work easier, and she offered her help freely. Yet, even when she smiled, others sometimes lowered their gaze, unsure how to behave around someone who looked so different. Her mother used to tell her, "The earth made you big because your soul is big. Do not shrink for others." Nalin tried to believe those words. She truly did, but as she grew into adulthood, she began to feel a different kind of weight, one that had nothing to do with her size. It was the quiet loneliness that settled inside her whenever she saw pairs walk together, laugh together, or whisper to each other in the evenings. She wondered if she would ever have that kind of closeness with someone. It seemed like a dream made for other people, not for her. Still, she continued living each day with strength and purpose. She helped with hunting preparations, though she preferred gathering fruit and herbs. She learned the stories of her people, repeated generation after generation. She watched the sunrise over the desert hills, feeling the warmth spread across her skin. She felt at home in the open land, where nothing judged her and everything had space to grow. But life in her homeland was slowly changing. Settlers had begun to move into nearby areas, bringing new buildings, new tools, and new ways of living. Some of them were friendly, others wary. Everyone walked carefully, unsure of how the two worlds should exist side by side. There were no fights, but there was tension like a tight string stretched between two hands, ready to break if pulled too hard. Nalin had learned to stay alert, but calm. She tried to keep her distance from the settlement, only going near it when necessary. Yet she remained curious. She wondered what life looked like for the people who lived in wooden houses instead of open-air dwellings. She wondered what kind of work they did, what foods they cooked, and what songs they sang around their tables. Most of all, she wondered whether they felt the same kind of loneliness she carried in her chest. One summer, the rains did not come as expected. Clouds drifted by but left almost no water behind. The rivers thinned, the soil cracked, and even the tall cactus plants seemed tired. The entire region felt thirsty. Nalin's community decided to travel farther for water and food supplies, which meant going closer to the frontier settlement than usual. Nalin volunteered without hesitation. She liked long walks and felt comfortable navigating open land. As she made her way toward the settlement, she kept her steps soft and her senses open. The dust followed her like a loyal shadow. In the quiet distance, she could hear the faint sound of animals from the settlers' farms, cows groaning, chickens clucking, and the occasional donkey braying. She approached carefully, not wanting to alarm anyone. While searching for the nearest well, her eyes landed on a small farm sitting at the edge of the settlement. It looked modest, almost fragile, compared to the wild, strong landscape around it. A wooden fence surrounded a patch of land where crops tried their best to grow despite the dry season. Near the barn stood a man working alone, repairing a broken water trough. His clothes were plain, worn from labor, and his hair fell messily across his forehead. He moved with slow caution, as if each task carried great weight. Nalin paused at a distance, watching him for a moment. She sensed something different about him. He did not carry himself like most settlers she had seen from afar. He seemed gentle, almost unsure of his place in the world. His movements were careful, his shoulders slightly bent inward, not from age, but from shyness. This man was Elias Turner, a farmer known in the settlement for speaking softly and avoiding unnecessary attention. He lived with his widowed mother and spent most of his days tending the land. People often said he was kind-hearted but too quiet for his own good. He rarely approached strangers, rarely joined community gatherings, and rarely looked others directly in the eyes. He preferred peace, work, and silence. Nalin did not mean to stare, but something about the scene held her interest. Elias noticed her presence only when he lifted the wooden plank and felt her eyes on him. He froze, startled. Most people reacted with caution when they saw Nalin for the first time. She expected that. But Elias did something different. He did not step back. He did not look at her with fear. Instead, his eyes widened with surprise and something like curiosity. His nervousness showed, but it was not the kind that pushed people away. It was the kind that suggested he simply did not know how to speak to strangers. Nalin gave him a small, polite nod. She did not step closer, allowing him space to breathe. Elias swallowed, unsure what to do, then raised his hand in a shy greeting. His gesture was crooked and awkward, but sincere. Nalin felt an unexpected warmth rise inside her chest. She returned the gesture, her lips curling into a slight smile. Their interaction lasted only a few seconds, a silent exchange of two people who had never imagined speaking to each other. But something meaningful passed between them. Nalin felt seen, not judged. Elias felt acknowledged, not overlooked, and both walked away carrying a quiet memory of that moment. As Nalin continued her journey toward the well, her footsteps felt lighter. She kept thinking about the shy farmer with the gentle eyes. She wondered why he had not looked at her with suspicion or discomfort. She wondered what kind of life he lived beyond the cracked door of his worn barn. She wondered whether their paths would cross again. Elias, meanwhile, stood still for several moments after she left. His heart beat faster, not out of fear, but out of something else. Something new to him. He had never seen anyone quite like her. Her presence was strong, yet peaceful. She carried herself with confidence, yet her eyes held an emotion he recognized. Quiet loneliness. The same emotion he tried to hide from others. He returned to his work, but his thoughts wandered. He wondered who she was. He wondered whether she would visit the settlement again. He wondered why her brief smile felt like sunlight warming a cold corner of his heart. Neither of them knew that their small meeting was only the beginning of a connection that would slowly reshape their lives. Both had spent years believing that closeness was something meant for other people, yet in that simple, wordless moment, each had found something unexpected, a sense of recognition, as if their souls had gently tapped on each other's door. And though they walked away in different directions, the quiet ache they once carried began to soften, touched by the hope that perhaps loneliness was not a permanent home after all. The drought grew worse with each passing week. The sky stayed clear, bright, and empty, as if it had forgotten how to hold clouds. Every day the sun hung above the land, like a silent watcher, giving heat but no comfort. Plants wilted faster, and even the strongest trees began to show signs of stress. People talked about the weather constantly, hoping the next morning would bring a hint of rain. But morning after morning, the land stayed thirsty. Nalin felt the dryness in the air as she walked across the plains. Dust curled around her feet, lifting lightly with every step. She carried a woven basket and a water pouch that was only half full. Her community needed supplies, especially water, and she volunteered to gather what she could from areas closer to the frontier. She had made these trips before, but this time the land felt different. Quieter, heavier, as if waiting for something to change. As she walked, her mind drifted to the shy farmer she had seen a few weeks earlier. Elias. She remembered his uncertain greeting, the way he had lifted his hand with hesitation but sincerity. She remembered how he had paused, surprised but not afraid of her presence. That simple moment had stayed with her, like a soft echo in her thoughts. It was strange how a brief meeting could stay inside someone's heart longer than expected. She told herself not to think too much about it. After all, many strangers crossed paths on the frontier. But still, the memory returned to her over and over, each time softening a quiet place inside her. The settlement was not far now. She could see the tops of wooden roofs in the distance. Chickens pecked at the ground near a fence line. A few settlers moved slowly through their chores, their clothes dusty from the lack of rain. Everyone looked tired, but determined. She approached the open area where traders sometimes gathered, though today only a few stood around their wagons. They nodded politely to her, keeping a respectful distance. Some were still unused to seeing someone from her community, especially someone as tall and strong as she was. Naylin offered a small smile in return, hoping to ease any tension. She filled her pouch at the shared well and traded herbs for a small amount of grain. It was a simple exchange, quiet and easy, but even as she completed her tasks, she felt her attention drifting toward the outer edge of the settlement, where she had seen Elias before. Her steps slowly carried her in that direction. She told herself she was simply checking the path or observing the land. But her heart knew otherwise. Something inside her wanted to see him again, even if only from a distance. Elias had no idea she was nearby. He stood outside his barn, sorting wooden boards that had dried too quickly in the sun. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. The heat made work difficult, but he kept going, moving with his usual quiet focus. His mother watched from the doorway of their small home, her face lined with gentle age. She admired her son's hard work, though she often wished he had someone to talk to. Elias had always been shy, even as a boy. Not because he disliked people, but because he feared saying the wrong things or taking up too much space. His voice was soft, his movements careful, as if he was always trying not to disturb the world around him. On this particular day, he felt more distracted than usual. As he hammered a nail into place, he paused and glanced toward the open fields. He did not know why he looked in that direction. Maybe a part of him hoped to see the tall woman from the Apache community again. He remembered her steady gaze, her calm posture, her thoughtful silence. It had been such a simple meeting, yet something inside him had shifted. He reminded himself not to think too much about it. She was a visitor on the land, and he was just a farmer, trying to fix his barn. Their lives were different. Their worlds were different. Still, the memory stayed with him, like a quiet spark he couldn't ignore. As he stacked the boards, he heard soft footsteps on the dry earth. He turned, expecting to see a neighbor, or perhaps an animal wandering near the fence. Instead, he saw Naylin walking slowly toward him, her basket resting on her hip. The sunlight framed her silhouette, making her look almost like part of the landscape itself, strong, steady, and naturally present. Elias froze for a moment, unsure what to do. He quickly brushed his hands on his pants as if that would help him feel more prepared. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from surprise and something else he didn't have a name for. Naylin lifted her hand in greeting. Her expression was calm, somewhere between friendly and unsure. She did not want to intrude, and she wanted him to know that. Elias lifted his hand too, this time with a little more confidence than before. "Hello," he said softly, though his voice barely reached her. She stepped closer but kept a respectful space between them. "I hope your work is going well," she said in simple English. She spoke slowly, not because she struggled with the language, but because she wanted her words to feel gentle. Elias nodded. "Trying to fix the barn," he replied. "The heat makes the wood crack." Naylin looked toward the wooden boards and nodded thoughtfully. "The land is thirsty," she said. "Everything feels tired." He couldn't help but smile a little at her words. They were simple, yet they captured the truth perfectly. "Yes," he said quietly. "It does." There was a soft pause between them. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Both seemed unsure how to begin a longer conversation. Elias felt the old familiar shyness creeping in, but this time it didn't make him want to hide. Instead, he felt a strange sense of comfort. Naylin noticed a broken section of fence near his barn. Without hesitation, she set her basket down and walked toward it. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the loose beam. Elias blinked in surprise. "Oh, you don't have to." "I don't mind," she replied gently. Before he could say anything more, she lifted the fallen beam with ease. Elias watched in quiet amazement. Her strength was natural and graceful, not boastful. He quickly stepped forward to help steady the other end. Together, they fitted it back into place. Their hands brushed briefly, a soft touch that surprised them both. Nalin stepped back, giving him space. Elias looked at the fence, and then at her, unsure what to say. He finally managed a small, honest smile. "Thank you," he said. I couldn't have lifted that alone." "You're welcome," she replied softly. Another quiet moment settled between them, but it felt warm, not empty. Elias found himself wanting to ask questions where she lived, what she enjoyed, whether she often walked near the settlement, but the words stayed caught in his chest, waiting for courage to release them. Nalin sensed his hesitation, but she didn't push. She simply stood there, letting the silence rest like a shared breath. Finally, Elias asked, "Are you gathering supplies?" She nodded. "Yes. The drought is hard for everyone. I came for water and grain." He hesitated, then pointed to a small storage shed. We have extra grain. You can take some if you need." Nalin looked surprised. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly. "It's not much, but I'd like to help." Her eyes softened. People rarely offered such kindness to her. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." As he walked with her to the shed, he felt strangely calm. For once, he did not worry about saying the wrong thing. Nalin's presence made silence feel natural, not uncomfortable, and she, too, felt a gentle ease around him, something she had not felt with many others. When she finally prepared to leave, carrying a small amount of grain and fresh water, Elias felt a tug in his chest, wishing the moment could last longer. "I hope we meet again," he said softly, surprising himself. Nalin paused, her eyes meeting his with quiet warmth. "I hope so too." As she walked away, the sun lowering behind her, Elias stood still, watching until she disappeared into the golden horizon. The land was still dry, the drought still heavy, but something inside him felt changed, lighter, warmer, almost hopeful. And Nalin, as she moved back toward her homeland, felt a similar change. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel quite so alone. The weeks after Nalin's visit passed slowly, marked by the same dry winds and cloudless skies. Every day felt almost the same, yet something small but powerful had changed in both Nalin and Elias. Each carried a quiet memory of their time together by the fence, the shared work, the shy smiles, the soft silence that felt strangely comforting. They continued their separate routines, but their thoughts often drifted to the same place. Nalin continued helping her community search for food and water. Even though the drought made everything harder, she pushed forward with steady determination. She gathered roots from deeper lands, shared water with elders, and checked on families who needed help. But when she sat by the fire at night, watching sparks rise into the dark sky, her mind inevitably returned to the shy farmer who had spoken to her with kindness, not fear. She wondered how he was managing in the heat. She wondered if his crops were surviving. She wondered if he thought of her too, even a little. And each time the memory of him tugged at her heart, she felt a warmth she had not felt in many seasons. Elias felt the same soft warmth. His mother noticed it before he even knew how to explain it. She saw him staring out toward the distant fields more often, pausing in the middle of chores as if listening for a sound only he could hear. She also noticed how he worked with a little more energy, as though something inside him had awakened. One afternoon, while Elias repaired a broken wheelbarrow, his mother stepped outside and wiped her hands on her apron. She watched him for a moment, with gentle curiosity. "You've been smiling to yourself lately," she said in her quiet, teasing voice. Elias's cheeks warmed. "Have I?" She nodded. "You have. Something on your mind?" He hesitated, unsure how to explain the gentle stir inside him. "I met someone," he finally whispered, his voice barely rising above the breeze. His mother blinked, surprised but clearly pleased. "Oh?" Someone from town? He shook his head. No, not from here. He did not say more. But his mother sensed this meeting meant something special to him. She gave him an encouraging smile and went back inside, leaving him with thoughts that fluttered in his chest like wings. Meanwhile, Nolan's community prepared for another long trip to gather supplies. The drought showed no signs of ending, and they had to travel farther each time. Some of the younger members grew tired, and the elders worried about their strength. Nolan felt responsible for helping them through these hard days. She never complained, never slowed down, even when her own muscles ached from carrying heavy loads. When the group decided to visit the frontier again for grain and clean water, Nolan's heart quietly leapt. She tried to hide her excitement from herself. She reminded her mind that she was going because of duty, not because she hoped to see someone. But her heart fluttered anyway, whispering softly that she might cross paths with Elias again. On the morning of their journey, she walked ahead of the group, guiding them across the dusty land. The sky shimmered with heat, and the earth beneath them felt warm, even through their shoes. The wind carried the faint scent of dry wood and distant crops. When the settlement finally came into view, Nolan felt her pulse quicken a little. She scanned the edge of the fields where she had met Elias before, hoping and not hoping to see him, but she did not see him immediately. Instead, she focused on helping the elders find shade and organizing the items they would trade. Elias, at that moment, was inside his barn sorting tools. He didn't know Nolan was near yet, but something urged him to step outside. A feeling, a pull, something gentle but persistent. When he finally walked out into the sunlight, he paused, blinking at the sight before him. There she was, walking with steady grace, tall and confident, her hair catching the sunlight, her basket tucked against her hip. Behind her, members of her community moved slowly toward the trading area, but Elias only saw her, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Nolan noticed his gaze. When their eyes met, something warm and familiar rose between them, like two threads gently weaving together in the air. She offered a small, shy smile, the kind she rarely showed. Elias smiled back, softer this time, almost without hesitation. He walked toward her, trying not to look nervous. "You're here again," he said quietly, stopping a few steps away. She nodded. "We needed more supplies. The drought is still strong." He glanced toward her group with concern. "Is everyone managing?" "For now," she answered. "But it is getting harder." Their conversation drifted naturally, as though they had spoken many times before. Nolan told him about the long walks, how the land cracked under their feet, how some families had to share one small pouch of water. Elias listened closely, his expression full of worry and empathy. "I wish I could help more," he said in a soft voice. "You have helped," she reminded him gently. "Last time, your grain helped us, and your kindness helped me." Elias lowered his gaze, his cheeks warming again. "I'm glad." A soft silence followed, warm and peaceful. The sun was bright, but the presence of each other created a shade of comfort neither had expected. When Nolan introduced Elias to one of the elders, he bowed his head respectfully, wanting to show appreciation. The elder, though tired, gave a warm smile. "Your heart is gentle," he said to Elias. "We remember kindness." Elias felt humbled. He had never stood out in the settlement. Many people barely noticed him. But here, among strangers, he was seen for his goodness. As Nolan helped the elders trade herbs for supplies, Elias quietly excused himself and returned to his barn. After a moment of searching, he came out holding a small wooden crate filled with dried corn and beans, more than he had given her last time, but still enough that he could spare it. He approached Nolan again, holding the box carefully. "This is for your community," he said softly. "If it helps even a little, I'll be glad." Nolan looked at the crate, then at him. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. "This means a lot to us," she said. "But you need food too." "We have enough," he assured her gently. "Please take it." She accepted the crate, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment. The touch was small but full of meaning, like a spark that flicked softly between them. Neither pulled away too quickly. When her group prepared to leave, Elias walked with her for a short distance, not wanting the moment to end too soon. They moved slowly, neither speaking at first. The quiet between them felt comfortable again, like the soft shadow of a tree on a warm day. After a while, Nalin turned to him. "You work hard," she said. "You care for your land. You care for your mother. You help strangers. That is a strong heart." Elias felt her words settle deep inside him. "Warm and real. And you," he said quietly, "carry strength with grace. You look after so many people. Sometimes, I think you carry the weight of the whole land on your shoulders." Her eyes softened. No one had ever described her that way before. People saw her size, her height, her strength, but he saw her heart. Before parting, Nalin hesitated, then said, "I'm glad we met again." Elias nodded, his voice gentle. "Me too. I hope we meet even more." She smiled at that, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Then she joined her community, carrying the crate of food across the dry field. Elias watched until she became a distant shape against the shimmering horizon. As he returned to his little farm, he realized something important. Sometimes, the world gave quiet hearts a place to connect. Sometimes, even in the hardest drought, two people could find something soft and life-giving between them. And Nalin, walking through the dusty plains with her people, felt a new kind of strength inside her, one that had nothing to do with her height or her muscles. A strength born from connection, from kindness, from the hope that perhaps she was not meant to walk every path alone. Their bond was still fragile, not formed into anything clear yet. But it was there, warm and steady, like a small seed waiting for the chance to grow. As the weeks passed, the drought did not break, the sky stayed dry and clear, the land cracked even deeper, and people everywhere grew worried. Yet among these hard days, Nalin and Elias carried a quiet brightness inside them. Each time they met, even briefly, the connection between them grew stronger. They were two gentle souls learning to trust the small comfort they found in each other. But not everyone around them understood. People in the settlement had sharp eyes. They noticed small things: who visited often, who talked to whom, who walked near the fences more than usual. It did not take long for whispers to begin. Some settlers watched Nalin from a distance, uncertain of her presence. Others noticed Elias's soft smile after her visits and began to talk among themselves. Elias heard small pieces of these conversations while trading at the market. A couple of men whispered behind him, "There goes the quiet farmer. He talks to that tall Apache girl again." Another voice replied, "Strange pair, aren't they?" They didn't sound angry, just curious, but their tone carried a hint of judgment. Elias felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He lived a quiet life and preferred it that way. The idea that people were now discussing him made his stomach twist, but at the same time, he felt a strange kind of courage growing inside him. He did not feel ashamed of speaking to Nalin. Not one bit. She had shown him kindness, and he wanted to do the same. Still, he didn't want her to feel unwelcome. He worried that the whispers might reach her ears and make her unsure about visiting again. The thought of her staying away because of others made his heart ache in a way he didn't understand. Meanwhile, Nalin also sensed a change. The last time she walked near the settlement, she noticed a few settlers watching her more closely. They weren't hostile, just cautious. She knew some people were simply unsure how to interact with someone from a different community, especially someone with her strong presence. But now, the attention felt heavier, sharper, as if people were trying to understand something they couldn't name. When she mentioned it to an elder, he sighed softly. "People often fear what they don't know," he said. "You are brave to walk between two worlds. But walking between two worlds can also bring challenges." Nalin nodded. She understood. She respected the differences between communities. But she wished people could see her for who she truly was, not just for her height or her background. A few days later, Nalan needed to gather herbs near the settlement. She decided to go alone, knowing she could move quickly and return before the sun grew too hot. As she walked past the outer farms, she saw Elias kneeling in his field, trying to water the soil around struggling crops. The water trickled weakly from his bucket, barely enough to moisten the ground. He looked tired but determined. When he lifted his head and saw her, his expression softened instantly. He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. "You're here," he said gently. "Yes," she replied with a small smile. "I came to gather plants that still grow in dry ground. They help the sick and the tired. I hope you find enough," Elias said. "This drought has taken so much from everyone." She nodded, then glanced at his field. "Your crops look dry." "They are," he admitted. "I'm doing what I can." She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the soil. "You work hard." "It shows." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes, I wish hard work was enough." "It is," she said softly, "even when it doesn't look like it." Her words comforted him in a way he couldn't explain. She had a way of seeing him, not just his actions, but the heart behind them. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Two settlers approached, talking loudly until they spotted Nalan standing near Elias. Their conversation suddenly stopped. The air felt tight. One man looked at Elias, then at Nalan. "Everything all right here?" he asked, trying to sound casual but clearly curious. "Yes," Elias answered quickly. "Just talking." The other man raised an eyebrow. "Seems like you two talk often." Nalan felt her heart tighten. She did not want trouble. She stood still, calm and polite, not wanting to make the situation uncomfortable. Elias swallowed, trying to stay steady. "That's not a problem, is it?" The men exchanged glances. "Of course not," one finally said, though his voice carried a note of misunderstanding. "Just unusual, that's all." "No." With a stiff nod, the two men continued walking. Elias watched them leave, his chest tight. He turned to Nalan with apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry. People are talking." Nalan simply shook her head. "You did nothing wrong. People will talk about many things." "I don't want you to feel unwelcome," he whispered. "You have never made me feel unwelcome," she replied gently. "That is what matters." Her calmness soothed him, but the worry didn't fully leave his eyes. Later that week, another situation tested their growing bond. Nalan walked near the settlement to gather water when a misunderstanding occurred. A settler woman saw her close to a small storage shed and assumed she might be taking something without permission. Nalan was doing no such thing, but the woman panicked and sent word to others. By the time Elias heard the whispers that Apache girl is wandering near the storage shed, his heart dropped. He hurried quickly to the area, troubled by the thought that people might make unfair assumptions about her. When he arrived, Nalan was standing calmly a few steps away from the shed, her basket empty. A small group of settlers had gathered at a distance, watching with uncertain expressions. Elias approached her immediately. "Nalan, are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her eyes held a quiet sadness. "I was only passing by," she said. "I did nothing wrong." "I know," Elias said firmly. The settlers murmured among themselves. Elias felt something inside him harden not in anger, but in determination. He had always avoided attention, always stayed quiet. But this time felt different. This time, silence would not be enough. He stepped forward, turning to the small crowd. His voice was steady, though quiet. "She didn't do anything wrong," he said. "She was only walking by. Please don't make assumptions about her." The settlers looked surprised. Elias rarely spoke up about anything, let alone in front of a crowd. His mother, watching from a distance, felt her heart swell with pride. Someone in the crowd muttered, "We just weren't sure." "Well," Elias replied, "now you are. She means no harm. She never has." There was no argument, only a slow dispersing of people. They backed away, some looking thoughtful, others embarrassed. When the area finally quieted, Nalin turned to Elias with a gentle, grateful look. "You didn't have to speak," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "Because you deserve fairness. And because I care." Her breath caught for a moment, not out of shock, but out of emotion. She looked at him, her eyes warm and deep. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias felt his heart lighten, like a burden had been lifted. He realized something important. Sometimes, kindness needed a voice, not just quiet thoughts. As they walked together away from the shed, a gentle peace settled between them. The world around them remained dry. The drought still unbroken. The challenges still real. But their connection felt stronger than before, strong enough to face misunderstanding, strong enough to continue quietly growing. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. They didn't need to. Their steps matched naturally, and their hearts felt closer than ever, walking side by side through a world that was slowly learning to understand them. Days passed after the misunderstanding near the storage shed, yet the memory of Elias standing up for Nalin stayed strong in both of their hearts. It was a simple moment, not loud or dramatic, but it carried a deep meaning. For someone as shy as Elias, speaking up in front of others was not easy, but he had done it without hesitation, moved by a quiet courage he didn't know he had. And Nalin, who had spent so much of her life being misunderstood, felt something inside her soften in a way she had never known before. When she returned to her community that evening, people noticed a new light in her expression. She helped distribute the grain Elias had given and sat with the elders to share tea. But her mind drifted to him, his gentle voice, the way he looked at her with respect, the sincerity in his eyes. She felt grateful, not just for the food he had provided, but for the way he had treated her with kindness, fairness, and dignity. Over the next week, the sky remained painfully clear. The sun did not hide for even a moment. The heat pressed down on the land, and both communities felt the weight of it. Even so, Nalin found herself walking toward the frontier more often, searching for herbs, checking water sources, or simply moving across the open plains. Sometimes she told herself she was only working, but her heart knew she was hoping to cross paths with Elias again. Elias felt the same quiet hope. He would rise early, sweep the barn, water the soil, check the fences, and then pause to scan the horizon. He didn't always see her, but each day he remained hopeful. His mother watched him from the porch, noticing the gentle change in him, the way he hummed softly while working, the way his shoulders looked a little less heavy, the way he smiled more often. She didn't ask questions. She simply felt grateful that her son had found something, or perhaps someone who brought peace into his life. One afternoon, clouds finally gathered in the sky. Not heavy rain clouds yet, but soft gray ones that promised a change. A cool breeze passed through the settlement, and people looked up with cautious hope. The drought had lasted so long that even a hint of change felt like a blessing. Nalin was walking near the settlement that day, carrying a basket of herbs and a small clay jar her community used for storing water. When she felt the cool air brush her skin, she lifted her face and smiled. It was a gentle breeze, not strong, but it carried the scent of moisture. She hoped the wind would guide more clouds toward the land. As she neared Elias's farm, she saw him sitting on the ground beside his field, resting his tired arms. He wiped his forehead and stared at the clouds as if trying to draw them closer with his thoughts. When he heard footsteps, he turned and saw Nalin approaching. His face brightened without him even realizing it. "You're here," he said softly. "Yes," she replied. "I came to see how the plants are doing." He laughed gently. "Still thirsty?" She sat beside him on the edge of the field, keeping a respectful distance. They watched the sky together, silently hoping for rain. The breeze felt kind against their skin, a small break from the endless heat. After a while, Nalin spoke. "Thank you again for what you said last time. You stood up for me when you didn't have to." Elias shook his head. "I did have to. It wasn't fair, and I couldn't stay quiet." "You were brave," she said. He lowered his eyes shyly. "I don't feel brave." "Sometimes," she said softly. Bravery looks like a quiet voice speaking the truth. Elias looked at her, and she met his gaze with warmth that felt steady and real. Their silence was not empty. It was full of meaning, as if words were growing gently between them. After a few minutes, Elias stood and gestured toward the barn. "I made something," he said. "I'd like to show you, if you want to see." Nalin nodded, curious. She followed him to the barn, where he lifted a wooden crate from a shelf. Inside it sat several small carved figures, animals, plants, and shapes. The carvings were simple but full of care. Each one looked like it had been shaped slowly, lovingly, with patient hands. "I make these when the evenings are quiet," Elias explained shyly. "I've never shown them to anyone outside my family." Nalin picked up a small carved bird. The details were soft, but the shape felt alive beneath her fingers. "These are beautiful," she said. "You have a gentle hand." His cheeks warmed at the compliment. "Thank you. I also made this." He reached deeper into the crate and pulled out a carving unlike the others. It was taller, a simple figure of a woman standing strong, her posture confident, her presence unmistakable. Nalin inhaled slowly as she recognized what the carving represented. It was her, not exactly, not perfectly, but clearly inspired by her strength. "I made it after you visited," Elias said quietly. "I hope that's all right." Nalin touched the wooden figure gently. "It is more than all right," she said, her voice soft. "You saw me the way I wish others could." Elias smiled, relieved. "I carved it because you stayed in my thoughts." Nalin felt warmth spread through her chest. She placed the carving back carefully. "You stayed in mine, too." Their eyes met again, and this time, neither looked away. A soft rumble echoed in the sky. Not loud, but enough to make both of them turn their heads. A dark cloud had thickened above the distant hills. The wind picked up, cool and sweet. People across the settlement called out with excitement. "It might rain," Elias whispered. "Yes," Nalin said, her voice full of hope. "Maybe the land is ready to rest." They stepped outside together, watching as the sky slowly shifted. The first small drop of water touched the dust near their feet. Another fell. And another. Soon, the smell of rain filled the air, soft, clean, and new. People ran into the open, lifting their hands to the sky. Children laughed. Elders whispered prayers of thanks. The dry soil darkened as the rain soaked into it. Drinking greedily after months of thirst, Nalin and Elias stood side by side in the light rainfall. It wasn't heavy yet, just gentle touches of water that felt like blessings. Nalin closed her eyes for a moment, letting the drops fall across her face. Elias watched her quietly, feeling something tender rise in his heart. When she opened her eyes again, she looked at him with a sincerity that made the moment feel timeless. "Thank you," she said softly, though not about the rain, "for being someone who sees gently." "And thank you," he replied, "for being someone who walks with strength." The rain grew steadier. People hurried indoors, laughing as the drops soaked their clothes. But Nalin and Elias did not rush. They stayed in the field, letting the rain fall over them like a promise of new beginnings. Elias finally spoke, his voice calm but full of meaning. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to walk through it with you, if you'd want that." Nalin's heart swelled. She had lived her whole life, trying to be strong enough for others, big enough for burdens, steady enough for responsibilities. But here, in this moment, she felt something new, a quiet place where she could simply be herself. "I would like that too," she said. The rain softened again, falling in gentle drops around them. The land breathed. The earth softened. And two hearts, once lonely and unsure, found the courage to grow together. Neither of them needed big words or grand promises. They simply stood side by side, knowing that the connection they had built, slow, patient, and full of kindness, was strong enough to face whatever would come next. And as the rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of long, hard months, Nalin and Elias felt something clear and bright settling inside them. They were no longer walking alone.